Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Zoom with the principal. Ms. Davis is currently out of state in Philadelphia. She is visiting another school site. That's what I'm assuming. But we do have Mr. Andrew Campbell here today with us, who is our assistant principal of tiered services. And
Yep.
we have Coach Kiesle here, and we have several coaches uh, that coach various sports on our campus. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mr. Campbell, who will be doing the introductions today.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Oh, sorry, excuse me. It's already bad. I'm fighting this cold that I think a lot of people are getting right now, but I'm here and happy to be meeting with everybody. Miss Davis is in Philadelphia at a training around Title IX, which is kind of connected with what we're talking about today. Title IX is a federal law that initially started with sports, but kind of got into a number of different areas here in education. But today we're here to talk about sports, and in particular, we want to talk about sportsmanship, especially as it relates to our school here on campus. I have two coaches with us other than Mr. Kiesle. I guess we have three coaches then. I've got Krisha De La Rosa, who is our volleyball coach. I've got Gabe, and I'm blanking on your last name right now, Gabe. I'm sorry, but he's our boys soccer coach. And I've got Matt Kiesle, who's our football coach and our athletic director. So for right now, I'm just going to hand it over to Mr. Kiesle, let him talk to you guys for a few minutes, and then we'll come back to me and we'll talk sportsmanship and everything.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Kiesle. I'm the head football coach here, but I'm also the athletic director. So I've been asked to come speak on just basically what our overall sports program is and what it's all about, and then talk to you a little bit about important topic, which is eligibility, and kind of give you a basic idea of those rules. So first of all, starting with our sports program is, first of all, it is a privilege, not a right, to play sports. We want kids to stay, continue to be good citizens and be good students while they are participating in their sport. It is what we think a very important part of the entire educational process. We are, an educationally based athletics, so we are, we are part of the educational process. Our sports are divided up into 3 seasons. Currently, we're in the fall season, and we're about a little bit past the halfway point of fall sports. And fall sports include football. Football is for both boys and girls. We do have, I think, currently 3 girls in the football program. Girls volleyball, boys and girls cross country, girls tennis, and girls golf are our current sports. Those students have been practicing and participating since right around the first day they could start was August the 4th, and their season will run through early November, plus any playoffs that the teams might qualify for. The second group of sports, the next ones that are coming up, are the winter sports. The winter sports consist of boys and girls basketball, boys and girls soccer, and wrestling, which is a co-ed sport. Recently, they've added a girls division. I believe last year we had 1 girl participating. We've had more than that in the past. But those are the 3 sports in the winter, and they begin their tryout process on Monday, the 30th of October. So that's the first day that that they can have official practice. Many of the coaches are currently holding conditioning workouts in open gyms and such, but official tryouts cannot begin until the 30th of this month. Finally, we have the big season, which is spring. Spring practices will begin in late January. They actually can start official practice on the 29th of January. And bear with me for the long list of spring sports, but spring sports include baseball for boys, softball for girls, boys volleyball, boys and girls track, boys golf, boys tennis, badminton, which is a co-ed sport. They actually have compete with each other. They have mixed doubles and events like that. So both boys and girls play badminton. And finally, boys and girls swimming. Those sports will all be spring sports and can begin practice at the end of January. For an individual athlete to play sports, the first and most important thing they need to do is get a physical examination. They'll need a physical examination every year. So, any exam that they have is good for 365 calendar days. So we sometimes have student athletes that have to re-up their physicals in the middle of the season. But as a whole, we like them to get them before the beginning of their season. And those physicals would be good for the entire school year or for one entire calendar year. Currently, we have a doctor coming on this Friday at 3 o'clock in classroom P14. And he'll do physicals for a $25 fee. Also, if you use our website under the athletics tab, you can find a link to the Eastside physical form. It's a 3-page form, which we would like to have pre-filled out. It has a medical questionnaire, and then the other pages the doctor fills out during the exam. You can also take that physical form to your family doctor if you've got the ability to get into your own doctor, but we do provide Dr. Shahab comes and does a lot of physicals for a reasonable price. So that's the first thing a student athlete needs to do. The second thing they need to do after they have a physical is go on to our athletics registration website. You and the athlete need to complete a process there, including e-signing some acknowledgments and things like that, uploading that physical form, and uploading a copy of your insurance card, because the other thing that a student needs is valid medical insurance to play sports. I then check that off and clear the student once those things are there, or I help the student through the process if they're having any difficulty with it. And to participate, they need to complete that process too. So that's athletic clearance. Finally, there's 2 types of eligibility that every student needs to meet. First is residential eligibility. If the student transfers anytime during their high school time from a different school, we would need to do some paperwork with the Central Coast section, which is our local governing body and is a part of the CIF, which is the California Interscholastic Federation. So any move of schools, we will need to do some sort of paperwork. Student starts here as a freshman, though, they become residentially eligible here at Piedmont Hills. If they were to transfer to another school, that school would have to handle the transfer paperwork to make sure that they're legally residentially eligible at that school. Then while they're here, they have to maintain academic eligibility. Every freshman that steps on campus for that first grade that passed 3 weeks ago or so is considered eligible. We don't go back and check their middle school grades. That would actually be a nightmare trying to get that done. But they all come in being academically eligible for that first 6-week grading period. During that 6-week grading period, all athletes, including incoming freshmen, have to maintain a 2.0 grade point average and must pass at least 20 credits, which you get 5 credits per class. So that means they have to pass at least 4 classes. This is the state minimum. If a student does not pass 20 credits and or does not maintain a 2.0 grade point average, they become academically ineligible for the next grading period. Those grades go into effect 5 days after the end of grading period. So like our last grading period had ended on September 16th or 15th, and those grades went into effect on September 22nd. So those students became eligible or ineligible at that time. We do have a resource called academic probation. Academic probation is when a student athlete is struggling, they can apply for a probationary period of one grading period. It only lasts for 6 weeks. For that 6 or 7 week grading period, whatever the grading period is. And they will retain their academic eligibility as long as they passed 4 classes. That's an absolute state minimum. If you only pass 3 of classes, you're not going to be able to play. You simply have to meet that minimum. You can do academic eligibility once in your first 2 years of school, so as a freshman or a sophomore, and once again as a junior or senior. So those 2 grading periods during your entire career, you could use academic probation to continue to be eligible, and while you're working on your grades. If you fail to make grades after that that grading period, then you would no longer be able to. Many of the students do continue to practice with the team. That's kind of an individual decision and a coach's individual decision. But obviously we want to encourage the improvement in the classroom. So sometimes it's a good idea to just have the student step away from the sport and work on their grades. That's kind of individual programs make that determination. To get academic probation, they would have to come see me. We would fill out an academic probation form. It gets signed by myself, by their head coach, by you, the parent, and then finally by the principal. And then I file that with the league office, and they are granted eligibility for the rest of the grading period. And that's kind of the process for sports. As each season begins, like I said, our next season will begin on the 30th. Official trials will begin on the 30th of this month. If your student athlete is currently playing a fall sport, they will be granted a tryout period by their next sport. So they are expected to finish their current sport, and then they will be, the coaches will all hold any further tryouts after the end of the fall seasons. Every student gets an opportunity, to make a team. Many sports, like I coach football, we're a non-cut sport. So everybody that comes out, as long as they're showing up and participating and following team rules and such, gets to remain on the team. There's no guarantee in playing time, but there is a guarantee of the spot. Some sports like basketball, soccer, volleyball, they often have to make cuts because they just can't keep all those kids. And so they will cut down to a manageable number. And those decisions are made by the individual coaches during those tryout periods. So that's basically a summary of how the sports program works here. I don't think I have any questions. And I had one question regarding the post the link to the clearance form page. It's the Piedmont Hills website. Okay, we'll do that. Oh, that's been done. Thank you. So yes, the form goes from the doctor and gets uploaded onto the clearance website. All that information can be found on the Piedmont Hills website under the athletics tab, which sometimes ends up way over on the right-hand side under more. It doesn't always make the first page. So it's the last item on the Piedmont Hills website. So I think that's fulfills what I was here to talk about. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. Andrew?
Yeah. Thanks, Coach. So just to review real quick, Mr. Kiesle talked about 17 different sports that we have on campus. Matt, can you tell me, I think we have 500 individual students who participated in sports last year. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it's usually between 500 and 600, which is, a quarter of our campus plays one sport or another. We've been as high as a third of our campus at times, that participate in sports.
Right. So that was kind of what I wanted to say too, is that we're somewhere between a quarter to a third of our campus participating in sports every year, which is why the next part is really important for us to talk about, which is the sportsmanship side of what our expectations are with our students, our coaches, our fans, our families, and what we would expect for our families and students to do, with what CIF and CCS expect our families and everybody involved to participate in. So in the chat here, I'm going to put 2 links. One is from CCS, and that is our local area sports organization. It stands for the Central Coast Section, and that's where we have our own division, and that's where we do our playoffs and everything is in CCS level. And then CIF, which is the California Interscholastic Federation, and that is the statewide organization that monitors all the sports for all of the schools, whether they're public or private. And so those links are there in the side of the chat for you if you want to take a look at them. And they go over all kinds of different pieces of information. But one piece that we really want to point out again is that that sportsmanship side. I was looking at it this morning just to kind of refresh myself on a couple of things. I found it really interesting that the CCS one actually has some data from last year about how many essentially referrals and things that they've had to do for sportsmanship issues. And they actually call out how many people were removed from games last year for sportsmanship issues. And I just lost my number, but it was over 500 students and coaches who have been removed from games in last year's events. So how do we not get students and coaches removed from events, right? What are we looking for? And I think most of the things that they're talking about are fairly common knowledge, but still need to be addressed. So first one is just language use, whether it's students or coaches or people in the stands, the use of language that becomes abusive, especially towards opponent players and referees, is something that is definitely a large issue that we want to address, that we want to make sure that our students and everybody is aware of, that we will be asking people to monitor that language use. And again, I think just from the history that I've seen as an athlete, as a coach, as a administrator watching these games, it seems like those language choices towards referees in particular are the things that come up most often, and something that we really want to address. I thought it was very interesting that they included everybody who's considered part of a school site as those people that we want to make sure are following through with their sportsmanship. And so again, just kind of fun to put out there. This included the cheerleaders. This includes the band when they're there and participating. They have the same regulations around them, around what kind of sportsmanship wants to happen. There are rules around uniforms. There are rules around what you can bring to a game and what you can, how you can dress during a game. You have to be dressed in order to go to a game as a spectator. There are regulations on what they consider appropriate dress. So yes, keep your shirts on. There's even a thing about body painting. Body paint does not count as an article of clothing. You need to keep your shirt on over your body paint. Face paint is okay. Body paint is a no-go. But again, I invited Mr. Gonzalez here, Gabe, as one of our coaches, because I wanted to get kind of experience about what he's seen in terms of what he sees in terms of that sportsmanship, and where he would hopefully have our spectators kind of realize where we're drawing the line and where we want to have that respect. So Coach, if you have a moment, do you want to talk a little bit about
that? Sure. I'm sorry, what did you want me to start with as far as?
I just, what have you seen and experienced? Here, I'll give a story, okay? And then hopefully maybe you have a story that's kind of, that we can kind of go along with that too. About 4 years ago, we had a team on our campus that was a visiting team at another campus. And our participants felt that the other team was getting a little physical and they weren't getting the calls from the referees and things. And at the end of the game, there was some bad feelings that were being shared by our team towards the referee and towards the other participants from the other school. Following that, our participants, our students, went onto social media, and this is the real world. This is what we have to live in these days with social media and everything. But social media is regulated as part of the sportsmanship as well. And so our students went on social media and actually made threats. Said that when they came into our school, that they would be just as physical, if not more physical, that they threatened to hurt other players on the other team. And we had to call in those players. We had to reprimand. We had to make apologies. It was very disappointing, honestly, that we felt like why it seemed odd that we would have to have that kind of discussion with students at our site around what was appropriate in how they were discussing how they felt about a game, that they took it way too far. And it wasn't even at the game, it was afterwards. And it was, you know, maybe they think it's private, but it's not private, right? It's out there and it's for the world to see. So Gabe, have you seen anything like that?
I remember that story vaguely. Yeah, that was an interesting one. On boys soccer specifically, no, we haven't had that. Have I heard anything remotely close to that? Yeah, you hear little grumblings of stuff like that from time to time. Usually it's in the moment. The social media thing is a whole different beast, but you know, speak directly to soccer and more generally, I guess, as opposed to specific, but soccer gets very, it's a passionate sport. People that tend to play tend to be really passionate, not just the players, but also the parents and the fans, whoever comes to watch it. And it gets to be a little bit difficult. And, you know, there's a certain amount of, I guess, rapport or respect that you would hope that these young men would and women would show their opponents and their fans, and that they would reciprocate that as well. Unfortunately, when you do get competitive and your fan base and your player base is as passionate, it does get a little colorful at times. And the referees tend to be pretty good at that. I know there's been instances where referees have kicked people out, and at my games included, some parents got a little too excited. And, you know, we tend to have a pretty good rapport with our student athletes and our parents. And I've had to actually ask specific parents to leave. And you know, a lot of what we do is based on compliance. Not just on the student athlete side, but also the parent side, and building up that respect and rapport with the parents and the student athletes when we ask them to do a thing such as, you know, vacating the stadium. When they have respect for the coaches, the parents, the players, they what I've seen is they will recognize that they've made a mistake and they have left without any kind of issue. Because ultimately, what does happen, the officiators are usually pretty good about giving them a warning, letting them, you know, hang themselves out to dry and then sending them off. And they'll notify the parents or the students that if they don't leave, the game will be canceled. And that's not something that anybody really wants to see. So there are occasionally issues with relationship to sportsmanship, that conduct that's not really appropriate, but it does get handled pretty quickly and I think pretty well. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Campbell, but there typically is school administrators on site for the most part for all these games. And so if it does get out of hand or there's some things that we can't handle, there's always somebody there that's has elevated status or whatnot that can typically assist us in gaining compliance where we can't get it.
That is something that we do try. I mean, there's certain sports where it's mandatory and there's other sports where it's more voluntary, but there are always, or should always be, additional staff on site in addition to the coaches that are there. I think this is an important moment to talk about how some of our coaches are volunteers from off campus. Mr. Gonzalez here is not an employee of the school itself, but comes in here to help coaching, whereas Mr. Kiesle and Miss De La Rosa here are both employees at the site. And so it is kind of nice to have the students, the teachers as coaches, because they know the students a little bit, they maybe know the community a little bit. At the same time, I know Mr. Gonzalez here knows his players and his families really well. So he, like he's saying, it's kind of nice that he can turn to a family member maybe be inappropriate and say something along the lines of, hey, like we're pressing the line here. Like we know each other, right? I think this is where we need to stop. And Ms. De La Rosa just put something in the side. I was just going to have you speak since you're still here. Do you have a moment to say a thought?
Yeah, just really quickly, with sportsmanship, there's a big role in everyone that's going to the sport, right? Everyone that is coming to the game is either have a passion for the sport that they're watching or a passion for whichever player that they are supporting. And so just making sure that we need to set a good example for our athletes and those around us, and by showing grace when we have victory and dignity in defeat. Along with sportsmanship, though, is our parents and the role that we have with it, and just making sure that we are encouraging our athletes to fuel the passion that they have for the sport in a positive way. And while winning is one of the ultimate goals, or one of the goals that we are trying to get in the season, one of my ultimate goals is to kind of push the students to their potential and their best self, as well as being kind human beings. So sometimes we will fall short of that, and we kind of also have to be able to take that ownership of like, well, what went wrong, instead of blaming onto others or refs or the other team of what ended up happening. And then another key part of sportsmanship is just kind of communication with our parents and our players. And so if there are issues or concerns, just making sure that everybody is on the same page. And then lastly, trusting me as a coach and the other coaches in the program to train our athletes and have the different strategies and decisions being made during games and throughout the season, since it's a part of a bigger plan to develop each player's skills and character. Coach Kiesle mentioned this already about in no-quit sports, practice is guaranteed and playing time is not guaranteed, right? And so sometimes not every athlete will get into the game. And a part of that sportsmanship is kind of keeping a positive attitude and supporting the players where they're at. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, Ms. De La Rosa. I appreciate that last part, because that was something I wanted to talk about as well. As a reminder to our students and our families that our coaches really are there as volunteers, and it's because they love the sport and they want to help our students grow as athletes and as people in general. And so that's an angle that I don't think we talk about a lot, because sometimes we're talking about how family members are sometimes crossing the line towards calling out a ref or calling out a coach. But sometimes it's our own players, our own students, who are not quite at that level of like understanding, like, hey, this is a resource for you, and they're the expert in the field right now. They should be respected and understood that their choices, their decisions are those that are best for the student and best for the team. So sometimes it's not the choice that a student wants, or even necessarily that a team wants, but the coach feels like that's the best decision in that moment for both that person and that team. So if a player is not getting enough play time, but they feel like they're better than everybody else, because I'm sure everybody gets that every now and then, it's the coach's decision is to make that, and they're doing that with experience behind them, and not only their years of experience of being an athlete and a coach, but also their experience with the students that are there. So that's a very, very difficult one to manage, but that's a very real piece of it as well. I want to share two stories that actually don't have to do with high school sports, because I just think it's interesting how the things that we see in high school tend to come from earlier in our sporting careers, right? So let me if you'll go with me, let me just have a couple of discussions around two games that I saw last week. So last weekend, I saw my nephew playing a soccer game. He's 10 years old, and he plays for a competitive soccer team. The guys on that team have been playing competitively for 4 or 5 years. I remember when they were 5 and it was, here's the ball and everybody just runs the ball. Everybody runs the ball and they don't really know their positions, everything. But now that they're 10, they know how to hold their lines, they're doing formations, they're making plays, they're making passes, and it's really cool to see the growth of them. But now that they're 10, they're kind of in control of their bodies a little more, and yet they're also still probably more competitive than they really need to be at that age. So I'm watching this game, and it's a very close game. And they're kids, they're 10, and they're getting a little handsy. I think that's pretty common in soccer. Coach Gabe, you can tell me if that's a thing or not. Yeah. And so kind of off play, one of the kids pushes another kid down. And that kid gets up and he turns around and he spits on the other kid. Now, that seems like pretty extreme. I'm sure that kind of stuff happens every now and then. Emotions get the best of everybody. But the scary part was not a kid pushing a kid or a kid spitting on him. It was the parents. Because as soon as a kid spit on the other kid, there's 6 parents up on the sideline yelling at the kid, cursing at him. Who the hell do you think you are? Calling him names, all this stuff. And these are 40-year-old parents yelling at a 10-year-old kid. Then the kid's parents get up and start to come towards the other parents. And I literally have never seen been this close to parents fighting over a 10-year-old soccer game. And it would just, I understand the passion and I understand the competitiveness and I understand all of that. But they were literally like, see me after the game in the parking lot. And that's just too much, like at the end of that game, they're just 10-year-old kids. They're still in 5th grade. They're still learning the sport. And what did they learn from their parents? They just learned more aggression. So that was very difficult for me. And it does feel like a lot of the sportsmanship stuff, honestly, from my experience, is parents putting too much pressure on their kids, making these sporting events too much of their life, too much of their identity. The same week, I saw my daughter, she's also 10, playing a volleyball game. She's never played competitive sports at all. I don't think anybody on her team has played any kind of competitive sports at all. They're still very much like, when the ball makes it over the net, they're really happy. And when the ball comes their way, if they're taking more than one step towards it, then that's amazing, right? They're pretty much stagnant, just standing there hoping that the ball hits them. But they're so proud of each other. Every time they hit the ball, every time somebody serves, whether it makes it over the net or not, all of those kids cheer. All of them. Whenever there's a point that ends, everybody cheers. It doesn't matter if your team made the point, the other team made the point. It doesn't matter if it's a point because it was a serve that was missed. It doesn't matter if a kid hit the ball and it hit somebody else in the back of the head. It doesn't matter. Everybody in the place cheers. Both teams, all the parents, everybody. Everyone's just kind of happy there to see this growth happen from these kids. And it's just really this strange dichotomy of, these kids are new to a sport. Let's just support them. These kids have been competitive for a couple of years. We have to be super aggressive and get a win. And what did that Saturday mean for the volleyball team? Nothing. It was just a volleyball game. Go have some fun. What did that game mean for the soccer players? Nothing. It was just a Saturday game. It wasn't in a tournament or anything. It was just a game. So really, at the end of all of this, and coming from somebody who was a coach, I coached cross country and track. I have banners hung in another school that we earned. But what does it mean at the end of the day? It's supposed to be a sport. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a pastime more than it is a championship. Either of my coaches that are still here want to say anything else to add to this?
Do we have any questions from the parents? Does anybody want to add anything or ask for clarification while we got the athletic director here? You can go ahead and enter the chat, put your hand up if you want to do that.
So I saw a couple of questions in the chat. I'll try to address really quickly. The NCSA, I had to look up while we were talking. That's like applications to get into college sports. I know nothing about it. Mr. Kiesle maybe knows something, but I personally don't know anything about it. Mr. Kiesle, do you have any information about that?
I'm not familiar with that one. No.
Okay.
The only
Usually the counselors know the difference between if you are going into like NCAA and the school has different stuff. I would reach out to the counselor with that question because I think that's specific to the application depending on the college.
yeah, and there is
My understanding.
a group called the NCAA Clearinghouse, which student athletes that are planning on playing in college should register with. And it helps to establish whether they are eligible for a 4-year school athletically. There are certain requirements they have to take, which are, certain amount of math, certain amount of science, things like that, very similar to like, regular college admission standards.
Right. And I know generally the answer is work with that specific college. If it's what they accept is different than what we would. You have to meet your requirements for graduation, but what there is to go to enroll into that college, it's different how they work the sports and the courses that you take in high school. But don't quote me on that. I would ask a counselor. If we don't have any other questions, oh, we have one. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi.
Ms. Halal.
Hi. Yes. Hi. My son plays soccer for a club, and he also played for Coach Gabe. Can they still continue with the club practices, or do they have to stop and focus on high school?
Okay, so that's a really good question. It's a rule called Rule 600. That's how many rules there are to govern things in their CIF. But so the basic rules are once you play with your high school team, you can no longer play with your club team. And individual coaches, soccer probably deals with it the most because we play winter soccer and there are club sports, club soccer going on at the same time. There's a few exceptions. The ODP, which is the Olympic Development Program, they have some exceptions for that, but it's very rare. So basically, you do need to focus on your high schools once the high school season begins. And like I said, the practice, that's kind of up to the high school coach. You don't want to have the kids overextend themselves, but that's kind of on a individual basis. But they can't compete in an outside organization during their season. Once the high school season's over, they can play all the club stuff they want. But during the high school season, they have to play high school only in game.
Okay, if they have like one-on-one training, is that acceptable? Or do I need to speak to
As
the
I
coach?
said, that's kind of up to the individual coach,
Okay.
I mean, because I know Gabe does work with club kids too, so he probably knows more about that than I do as far as soccer goes.
Okay, thank you.
And it looks like we had one question to where if I try out for a spring sport, do not make that sport. Can I try out for another sport?
Great question. Yes, of course. Again, I think swimming is a non-cut sport, so they do have JV heats at the same time too. So, I doubt that there would be any cuts there. But if you are cut from a sport, yes, you may try out for another sport, and coaches will usually give you that chance. They're required to give students a chance when they're coming from one sport to the other. But what you cannot do is you cannot quit a sport to go out for another sport. You can only do so with a coach's release, sometimes with an agreement. Then the coach, you go up to the coach and say, you know, I'm not getting any playing time. I'd really much rather go run track or something. The coach will sometimes let you out of that obligation, but they don't have to. Once you make a commitment to a team, you know, the team is making a commitment back to you. So, you know, there are opportunities or instances, excuse me, when a student will get released from one sport to go join another. I've been part of that several times because it's just, you know, the coach is okay with that, and it just seems to be in the best interest of the student athlete.
Hey, Coach, could I ask you a follow-up question?
Yep.
So like my daughter, she tried out for swimming the 2 days of tryouts, and you know, she missed the cut. And so she thought about, you know, she was wondering, you know, because the tryouts were similar days for that and for cross country or for another, or not cross country, for track or badminton. So she's wondering, does she just go straight to the coach? Because she's going to try out again for some way she makes it this time. And she wants to know, do I just go straight to them? Because she kind of got bored at the end of the semester last year. She's always in some kind of sport and she didn't have anything to do for the spring.
Yeah, and I think that I know I actually help out with the track program. I mean, I know we take kids. I mean, we don't cut and track. You know, the only reason you get dismissed from the team is because you're not showing up, you know, or any other disciplinary reasons. But basically, yeah, I think just go straight to the coach, and also come see me if they not sure who to go see, and I can help out with that too. If that's a situation, yeah.
Hopefully she makes the swim team. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we're gonna wrap it up for today. I'd like to thank Mr. Campbell and Coach Kiesle, and we have Coach De La Rosa as well, and Coach Gonzalez. Next week is Ms. Davis should be back next week, and it's gonna be, our topic is executive functioning, which I had to look up. It refers to the higher level of cognitive skills you can use to control or coordinate your other cognitive abilities and behaviors. Reading that did not give me any clue of what it actually is, so tune in next week. I'd like to thank you guys and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.